Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this support session. For those of you who are new to teaching the Pearson Edexcel A-Level Drama and Theatre qualification, I'm Paul Webster. I'm the subject advisor for all our drama and performing arts qualifications, and I'll be leading the session today. Please feel free to say hello in the chat, put where you are and whether this is you're brand new to this or whether you've been teaching it for a year or two. I recognise some of the names and faces here, so welcome to you all. We've been having various conversations via email, so and some of you, we've had some one-to-ones as well. So hope that you are all okay today and you're looking forward to this session. So let's get cracking. In the session, we're going to be looking at the structure and the assessment objectives. We'll go through each of the components. We'll have a look at the admin and the resources that are available. You are free to ask questions throughout. There will be sections at the end of each component, but if you have a question, please put it into the chat. I'm sure that it will be acknowledged and reflected by other people as well in terms of a question that you might share with them. And if you want to come off mic and say your question verbally, please use the hand raising icon and I'll invite you to come off. So let's begin with an overview of the qualification, first of all. It's been available since 2016. The first overall certification was in summer 2018. We did have an AS version for a couple of years, but made a decision to just focus on the A-level instead since around 2019. There are two external assessments in components 2 and 3 that are available once a year for those who are in year 13. And the internally assessed component 1, is available to be done at any point from the start of year 12 all the way through to May of the final year. We have lead examiner and moderator reports that are released after each series, which clarify what's happened across the whole cohort. And this qualification is taught in the UK, but also internationally as well. So we don't have a separate international version of the qual. Everybody, wherever students are, will be doing the same one. We have lots of online, live and recorded training available, which mainly takes place in the autumn and spring terms. So we will be releasing the details of the events that will be taking place in the next academic year, hopefully before the end of the summer term. We will also be offering some new events this year. So we usually focus on components 1 and 2, but we'll also be offering some events to support with component 3 as well. We have lots of published resources available, and we're in the process of developing an exemplar library, as we have done with the GCSE. So if you taught our GCSE, you know there's an extensive library that's available. So more on that later on in the year. Now, the assessment objectives for the A-level, these are all the same across the 4 different exam boards that offer A-level drama and theatre. And there is a 30-70 split between practical and non-practical. So for component 1, which is 40% of the qualification, 25% of it is assessed through practical work. For component 2, it's totally practical, and that's 20% of the qualification. And then component 3 is worth 40% of the qual, and that is the study of 2 set texts and an evaluation of the live theatre. But this is just a brief overview. We'll go into the details in a moment. But lots of different approaches there, and in terms of the rules around A-level, there are things to take into consideration. Like a student must be introduced to at least 5 different plays across the 2 years of study. They must be introduced to the methodologies of two practitioners. They have to see live theatre work, and they have to have at least two different opportunities to perform to an audience. Now, in terms of structuring the course, if you need any help, we have an example of a course planner, and on the screen you'll see in the top right-hand corner it says course planner and then surrounded by pink. We sent you a copy of the presentation slides. And when you hover over, if you open them and hover over any of those descriptions in the top right-hand corner, it will take you to either the document itself or the place on the website where you can find it. We sent you a slightly revised version of the slides yesterday, just because a couple of the links weren't working in the original version. So if you want to use the latest version, please feel free to open it and follow along. So in the course planner, and our suggestion is probably the approach that most teachers will take, which is that in year 12, in the autumn term, there is an induction period, an introduction to drama and theatre, and that students are given a range of opportunities, including practical sessions, to develop their underpinning knowledge and understanding and skills. Some teachers will do a kind of, potted history of drama from the ancient Greeks all the way through to now, but there's lots of ways of being able to do it to make sure that students appreciate what it is that they're studying. And in this suggestion that you would do some workshops on scripted work and on devising, and maybe potentially introduce one of the set texts, so the section B set text, for example, Mackinac, that would be practically explored at this point, rather than going straight in with the heavy stuff around questions, but to actually do a table reading, get it on its feet, try scenes out, some really interesting practical work, because students will need to understand how theatre is made from a directorial perspective, from a performer's perspective, and from a designer's perspective too. And hopefully within this first term, or within the first year at least, they're going to be able to experience some live theatre, but preferably as soon as possible. Now, this could be through actually going to see things in person in the same room, but if that's not available, then being able to see recordings or streams of live theatrical productions, because for some students they may have done GCSE and may have had an introduction and some education on what live theatre is and how different it is from screen performance. But for those who haven't, then this is the perfect opportunity to do it, so they understand and can begin to acknowledge that there is the language of theatre that they'll need to be learning about and being able to implement themselves. Within the spring term, students can begin the exploration of an extract from a performance text and the methodologies of a particular theatre practitioner. And this is all going to lead into the work that they're going to do within component 1, because they have to use an extract and a practitioner in their work. And then they're going to begin to create and devise their own work. But before they get to that point, it would be good for them to be introduced to how theatre is made and professional work. And then the students will move on to create their devised work and their portfolio of evidence, which will detail the devising process that they've been through. And in this summer term as well, they can do some practical explorations of the second set text that they're going to learn about for section C of component 3, and also the potential plays for performance in component 2, which will take place in year 13. So after the summer holidays, Then potentially in the autumn term, they will look deeper into their component 3 text and again explore the methodologies of a new practitioner, a different one to the one that they learnt about in component 1. They'll see more live theatre, and then they will be preparing their monologues or duologues and their group pieces for the component 2 performances, which take place in the spring term. More on that later on. They've got a 4-month window in which those performances can take place. Then they'll be doing their component 3 revision in line for the exam, which is going to take place around the end of May, and I will share the details of that with you shortly. There is a question from Bethany. Hello, Bethany. How are you doing? And does the extract used as the stimulus that the devising work comes from have to come from the practitioner? And your example is Brecht and Caucasian short circle. It's absolutely fine to use Brecht as the practitioner and to use a Brecht play as the stimulus. You don't have to do that. You can choose to do Brecht as the practitioner, but then you're choosing kind of any play. You could choose anything at all that you think will be of interest to the students, and the students' role then is to use an element of the play, of the extract that they're going to look at, and stage it in using Brechtian methodologies. So there's a lot of freedom to choose what you want to do. Now, I said hello to Bethany because we've had many chats before. If any of you would like to say hello in the chat and say whereabouts you are, that would be absolutely brilliant, just so that we can hear from all of you. Serena, you have asked the question. If you have multiple groups, should they all devise from the same stimuli text, or can they use different texts? It's up to you. You can choose whether or not you want to say to them all, we're all going to look at the same extract from the same text and maybe read through it, get an understanding of it, talk about it, and then they work in their particular groups. It's also absolutely fine for you to say to them, we're going to have 3 or 4 different texts that we can talk about and we can look at together. And then they choose which one that they find most interesting or stimulating. So again, lots of opportunities, and yeah, you can have as many texts as you want to within the group. One thing about the practitioner is, again, you could say to students, you choose which practitioner you want to use, but the benefit about using the same one is that the whole group can do practical workshops and develop a greater understanding of a particular practice, of one particular practitioner. But you might have the luxury of a lot of time to be able to do different workshops with different practitioners. So again, it's up to you. Hello, Andy. We've also spoken quite a lot. And you're moving to Kenya. Wow. Okay. Well, the best of luck with that move. I hope that it all goes well. I presume that that's going to be soon, and that you're doing this in the forthcoming year, but wherever it is, the best of luck. Hello to you, Molly, with your own year 12 group. The best of luck with that. And for any of you, whether you're starting out, whether you've been doing this for a while, and you need any support, I can give you my details later on if you don't have them already, and you can get in touch. Greg, hello, Greg. You're in Ascot, and the 2 practitioners for devising and section C of component 3, yes, they must be different. So if you were going to use Brecht, for example, here the students wouldn't be able to use Brecht within component 3. They'd have to choose a different one. Hello, Renata. Welcome. And you didn't have enough students to form a cohort this year, but you're hoping to deliver next year. Fantastic. Well, fingers crossed. The students can do it. That would be absolutely brilliant. They'll want to do it, and hopefully you'll get the numbers. And welcome to you, Laura, in Alicante. And you're moving back to A level. Yes. let's do it. Well, hopefully you'll find the guidance and information we'll talk about here today to be inspiring and useful. Let's dive a bit deeper into component one. And students work in groups of 3 to 6 with up to 4 designers in a group. Their work should be between 15 and 30 minutes. As we said, it's an extract from a play that is used, and the extract should be at least 10 minutes long. And they're applying the methods of one theatre practitioner. What they also need to do is they will also refer to their experience of live theatre. So by this stage, they should have had some. It may be that it's live theatre that they've experienced before doing the course, outside of the course, something that they've experienced personally. But ideally, it would be within the context of the course and something that you've all seen together that you're able to analyse and discuss and look from the perspective of the semiotics of theatre, the language of theatre, and how the decisions that are made by theatre makers to communicate meaning to an audience, because that's what this is all about. So those influences, those ideas should be reflected somehow, some way within the work that they're doing. And that will be evident in the work that will be seen, the work that will be performed and shared with an audience, but also within their portfolios as well. So they'll be talking about the decisions that they've made and what they've been influenced by. And we'll talk a little bit more on that in a moment. So that's the kind of overview. In terms of, oh, hello to you, Sally. And you're going to be having to teach component 1 and 2 for the first time ever. Goodness me. Well, hopefully this is going to give you all the support that you need. So let's have a look at what happened last year. And these are some of the popular texts and extracts that were used. You will undoubtedly recognize all of these really big, strong plays. But obviously this is not exhaustive, and these are just ones that just tend to be the most popular. The most popular practitioners are the ones that you would expect as well. They're all men, but that we do have other practitioners as well that you might want to choose from. Some interesting work from people like Katie Mitchell, Aleki Blythe. Punch Drunk is incredibly popular, so I'm sure that your students will be interested in using their work. And then themes and ideas, including some kind of topical themes around displacement, political corruption, the impact of social media and body image, addiction, sexuality, so many things. And it is really interesting to see how the overall kind of themes and ideas come out each year and what might happen this year in terms of what's happening politically, what's happening around the world. So it'd be interesting to see what students come up with. A couple of questions here. Molly, could they use Brecht as their main practitioner, but have been inspired by complicité performance, want to integrate their techniques too? Yeah, so it's important that they focus on one practitioner and their methodologies. But if then when there's the influence of the live theatre and they've seen something by complicité, whether it's the encounter, mnemonic, whatever it would be, that they can refer to that. It might be about the use of technology, might be the way that complicité kind of use narration and storytelling. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. Avoid having multiple practitioners though that are the practitioner that they're working with. So just a slight difference, one live theatre and one for the main practitioner. And Francesca just wanted to check, when they devise, do they still have to use the text from the extract, or do they just use this as a stimulus? So in the specification, we have listed all the ways in which a student could use the extract. So it could be the language, it could be the characters, it could be the plot, it could be the style in which it's communicated, the structure, lots of different ways of doing it. If they do use the script, then it's about how they're repositioning it. What are they doing? How are they reimagining and taking this work to make it their own? So yeah, hope that helps. My pleasure. These are the component one practitioners. And these are the maybe practitioners that you want to use that aren't on this list. And that's absolutely fine. You just need to let us know. So if that is the case, then you just need to contact us at drama.assessment@pearson.com or my email, which I'll give you later on, and just to give us the details of which practitioner you're using for component three and which one you want to use for component one. In the top right hand corner is this list. So this is available on the website if you haven't seen it before. So some things that you might want to consider around component one when you are preparing your students to do this, that to encourage creativity and experimentation is the first thing, because this is probably the only component really where the students get to go all out with what they want to do, because they can choose lots of really interesting work for component two, but it's going to be staged in a more kind of end on proscenium march type uh, you know staging. So within component one, there's a lot more opportunity to try things out. Everything within reason, absolutely. I think we need to take that into consideration. So if they're going full on punch drunk simultaneous performances happening around the building and outside, that actually does make it a bit difficult for the recording to happen. So you might need to rein them in a little bit with trying to do things that are happening simultaneously in different places, because there's only one recording that's going to be submitted. So you might want to encourage them to do more of a promenade approach, which is fine because all the audience can be moving together. You can stick your camera on a dolly, make it out of an office chair on the tripod, and then wheel it along, and then stopping in each position. So always encourage interesting, exciting work that they may have seen or they may have created themselves, but just everything within reason. The second point is that if they do decide to have this like kind of wonderful experimental opening where as the audience come in to take their seats, they're kind of in character and they're leading them there, or there's things going on, there's action outside and stuff, that's absolutely fine to do. But any pre-show activity like that will count in the time limit for the performance. So if you are recording it and then it's going to be moderated, it's worth recording it from the point of when they're in situation ready to start the performance as such. So maybe it's worth just ensuring that we don't want them to run over the maximum time that they've got. So just make sure that that's taken into consideration. A student, all the students can direct as part of the creative process for component one, but there's no actual mark for directing. So it might be that when they're creating the work that they're taking it in turns to work out scenes and giving ideas, but a student cannot be assessed as just a director in this work. If they are making physical theatre led piece, that encouraging students to include movement material that is connected to the ideas in the performance, and that they need to incorporate vocal skills as well. So, because they're being assessed explicitly on vocal skills as well as physical skills. So, just making sure that if it's really movement based and heavily physical, that you are reminding them of this fact as you go through, because you're not directing this, you are facilitating them. So ensuring that they know what the guidelines are and how they're going to be assessed it's always a good reminder, isn't it? Sometimes students can go off down particular rabbit holes and without necessarily considering the whole picture. Um, In terms of your question, Renata, about is there a time limit for purely physical sequences? No, but if you're thinking that if they've got 15 to 30 minutes to do this work, depending on the size of the group, that actually if you've got a lot of kind of elongated physical sequences, it might be worth thinking, okay, well, let's remember that there is the necessity for the vocal skills. So there's not like I can't say, it 5 minutes would be the maximum because it really depends on the work. And they can do lots of physical work and still and be using their voices as they do it. So just be aware of that really in terms of just make a note of if you feel like they are overindulging in the pure physical sequences. Um, and the recording is an essential piece of evidence. So as I've said, like, if you trying to find a way between balancing the need to engage a live audience and satisfy the requirements of the assessment is really important. So students can do, they could do a thrust stage, they could do it in the round. You just need to find a way to be able to record it and capture them. And I'd say that there are some students who act with their whole body and you can hear them clearly. And therefore, those times when they have their back to the camera may not be an issue. But I would say it really just depends on the the skill level of the student and how they're able to communicate effectively. Having an audience in the recording footage is absolutely fine because it may be that it is quite an interactive piece that they're doing. And if as long as you've made it clear to the audience that it's being recorded and it will be used for assessment purposes, then that's brilliant. But yeah, not a problem. So the portfolio. Oh, I wouldn't recommend against Promenade. As I said before, like if you're able to do it, like say for example, though you had like 4 or 5 kind of stages around the space, or maybe going into other spaces, that as long as there's a way in which the journey to between each one and then the actual recordings are in those performance areas can be done smoothly, absolutely go for it. It's just when it's a bit it's just difficult to do because it's hard to manage the way through, or there's too many people in the way. Like it's about just trying to get a balance. So I would say that if students do want to do promenade, you kind of just make sure that they understand that it has to be filmed. So and that journey needs to go through. So nothing simultaneous happening because only one of them is going to be able to record to be recorded. So in terms of the portfolio, it's 2,500 to 3,000 words if they're just writing it. If they record it, if they want to do a presentation or be interviewed, or like a Viva, then that's between 12 to 14 minutes, and then there's a combination of the two if you want to that's possible. In terms of the portfolio, there are 6 statements that the students will be referring to. And in the top right-hand side corner, you can see that there's a guide to creating portfolios. This is really useful. It really provides further guidance on the type of things that students should be including and referring to. So I would say always get the students to include the headings within the responses if they're writing anyway, because it clarifies it for them, it clarifies it for you. It just gives you, it just makes it easier to kind of manage. In terms of this guidance, then that there are some things to consider. The first one is the word count is pretty strict. So encourage your students not to just kind of describe the plot or the narrative of what they've done, or because they're not going to get any marks for it. And in terms of tracking, in terms of the word track here, it's about implying a sense of journey and the students wanting to document their progress, their achievement, their ideas through the key stages of the rehearsal process. So this response here should consider the significant moments in the process, not just their introduction to the extract and the practitioner. It's about how the response to the extract and the practitioner has developed over time. The second statement is like you could kind of have a frame, a writing frame for this, which is give a clear example or evidence of research, detail how that research was used in rehearsal, and then explain how the research had an impact on the development process and the performance outcomes. So the students are getting into that habit of, right, okay, I found something, I'm then going to say how we then implemented it. And what might happen is that once the students get used to this idea that it then starts to manifest itself in what they're doing. So they're not just kind of, it's not just a reflective thing, they're actually doing it as they're going through the process. Ideally, students will be keeping notes as but we'll talk about a little bit about that in a moment. For statement 3, to evaluate how the chosen roles emerged and developed, they can evaluate the development in both positive and negative forms here, and anything is valid as long as it's supported with some detail of the example. So, and one way that they might want to do this is to evaluate the role in a chronological format from start to finish. Statement 4 is about the analysis of the practitioner or theatre makers and the impact that live theatres had. So we talked a little bit about this before, but this is where they're going to analyse how the practitioners influenced and shaped the development of their work as a performer or as a designer. It depends on what role the student has decided to take. And so it's looking at ideas and examples of methodology from the practitioner and how they've influenced and the student analysing those. So ideally, what has happened is that the students have been through some clear workshops and analysis of the practitioner. So when I said before, it might be more straightforward to just use one practitioner for everyone. This is what I'm referring to. You can go into a bit more detail. In terms of the live theatre, what they've seen, so the example we were talking about before with mnemonic or with complicite is that it might be the analysis of a particular production, or it might be like the theatrical approach, the use of a particular convention, a design idea, performance style. There's lots of ways in which the students can delve into this. In terms of question 5, this is an understanding of how the social historical impact has affected their work and connecting the audience that they've got. So that's an interesting kind of area for them to do, like the consideration of their audience in this. And then finally, the final statement is evaluating the creative choices they've made and whether they've been successful or not. So this is where the student outlines the aims of the final piece and then measures the success against their artistic intentions. So if they did want to, if it was like a, investigation of like the current political situation through physical theatre, were they successful? And how do they know this? They could they could talk to the audience, they could give the audience an evaluation form, a feedback form, and that can really help them answer the question. So this is, there are some obvious things, like if they were trying to make the audience laugh, did they chuckle? Did they do anything? Or was it greeted with stony silence? Which is always a bit disturbing for a student who thinks that they're being funny. So but sometimes the impact can't necessarily be read by an audience unless you kind of probe and interrogate them a bit further. So something worth talking to your students about is that the practical work in this is a group activity, yet the portfolio is a personal reflection. And when it comes to doing the portfolio, um, it the student who talks about the things that they've done and they talk about what this is for them is going to be able to access all the marks. When students talk about we all the time, we did this, we did that, it's fine for them to have a collective ownership, but the students need to make it personal as well. So a useful tip for collating evidence is that students create and maintain a working diary capturing the key moments in the devising process. Sally Ann, thank you for this question. A good question. When I say the social, historical, cultural, is that of the original text or is it of the work they've created? It's of the work that they've created. So it may be that what the students have taken from that original text is so far removed that an audience wouldn't actually know that they were making any reference at all to that play. So this is about them understanding this context and of the work that they're doing. Now, they may have set their work in a particular time, in a particular place, a particular period. And again, it's like, well, what does it mean for an audience now to be looking at this work and considering the social, historical, and cultural context? My pleasure. We have lots of exemplar work for component one. You can access this through going to the course materials, the teaching and learning materials section, and then looking in coursework support, exemplar material, and past training content. Got lots of examples there for performance and design responses. Here's some questions that you may be asking, and I think I've already answered a couple of them, that the teacher can't direct, but you can facilitate and you can do lots of workshops, etc., which will hopefully help them, empower them to make decisions. And punch drunk, yes, can be used. In terms of the portfolio, and what is included. So would a mind map be included? Would images and words and images? So basically the word count is 3,000 max. It doesn't include the statements. Those statements don't include. So if you with the statements, it's about 120 words. So mind maps, illustrations, annotations of text are not included in the word count. If a mind map is in place of a formal written statement, then which is allowed, then it should be included. If it's just an example of research or an illustration of a devising process, like a photo, then it doesn't need to be counted in the word count. Moderators will stop moderating when students have reached 3,000 words. So make sure that students aren't going well overboard. And you do have the opportunity to give them one set of feedback. So they can hand in a draft and you can give feedback and then they can write it again. So if they have gone well over, at least you can tell them. A bibliography isn't needed. Footnotes are allowed. The work, in terms of it being annotated, it's always useful and helpful if you annotate where you feel that the levels, the assessment objectives are being met. Any words that will explain and say why you've awarded the marks is going to be really useful, not only for yourself, but for the moderator as well. So I would say if you can annotate, then go for it. But it's not a requirement. You can also submit the work without any annotation at all. What you do have to do is submit the assessment sheets, which will have the grades, and then you can put comments on there, but you don't actually have to annotate the written work itself. The Samples that you're going to submit for moderation are uploaded via our online portal. So that's accessed through Edexcel Online, and you will be able to get access to Edexcel Online via your exams office. They will be able to set that up for you if they haven't done already. And it's really important that you get this, because anything that's on the website that is that has a padlock, that has a silver padlock. So there's lots of things on our A-level page that has a silver padlock. You need to you need to access via Edexcel Online. So it will ask you to log in to be able to download it. So if you haven't done that, please speak to your exams office. Oh, Renata, yes, please, let's go for it. Ask your question.
Thank you, Paul. It's a bit long to type, but it's not too long. I have a question. My understanding, especially from what I just heard from you and what I saw being done in my previous school, the school I used to work, is that those reflection prompts should be shared from the start clearly to the students. So from the start, their reflection goes in the right direction. However, I had a meeting when we were planning, the delivery of our A-level. I had a meeting with my head of department here, and she's very concerned about the issue of, students using AI and making sure it's the students' work. So she was quite protective about having them writing a lot in classroom time, which I think at an A-level, if you have to write more in depth about something, you have to give them time outside classroom and just use an AI checker or things like that. So what's your approach in terms of, making sure the work is theirs and there wasn't, nobody else collaborating or influencing them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, even before AI, there was this issue around students having outside support for the completion of their work. Now, the thing about it's only component one where this is an issue, because in the other components that it's either they're sat in an exam room or it's performance based. And so when in terms of students being able to work on writing up notes and things, they it may be that you are asking them at the end of a session to write up notes from the key moments in the session that they've developed. So you're able to see that. They would be able to write other notes outside of class, but because they're notes, you can then check them. So it's not that they would be coming in with reams and reams of finished essays. When it comes to writing up the statements, there is the expectation that you, whoever it is able to authenticate that it's their work. So it may be that you're building in sessions in which the students will do the final write-up with you there. So yes, they've got notes that they've been taking, they've got their working diaries, but that the actual finished work would be completed with you. And it's also in terms of the development of this work for the actual devising, that students could practice what they've created outside of lessons. So if, for instance, they'd created with when they're in class a scene that they then go and practice to develop performance skills for outside, that's fine. But again, they shouldn't be creating work when you're not around or whoever it is. That the creative process should be under supervision. So in terms of the question that you asked, which is, can they be given the statements from the start? Absolutely, because having this framework, having this understanding that this is the process that they're going to go through, these are the things that they have to acknowledge and recognize and include within their devised work and then be making notes on. It's imperative that that happens. It's just that you just need to manage it in terms of them not doing loads of the assessed work outside of class. So I hope that helps. And Laura, can they include appendices? Yes, they can. They can, yeah. It's absolutely fine. These questions, this might be a situation that you find yourself in, which is about the number of students taking the course and whether or not they can do monologues or duologues in components 1 and 2. There is the requirement at the moment for a group of 3 performers in component 1 and in section B of component 2. They can, of course, do a monologue in section A of component 2. If you have 1 or 2 students registered on the course, that we will allow the use of non-assessed individuals. So these can be students, teachers, people from outside the centre who would rehearse and perform the work that students create in devising, or the scripts that they choose in component 2. And we are likely to be changing this slightly for the future. So it's looking very likely, this is, nothing is confirmed yet, but it's looking likely that students will be able to do duologues within component 1 moving forward, but we are yet to announce that. So that might make it a little easier for you if you are dealing with small cohorts. For the moment, though, it's this is the case that it's 3, and in terms of if the shorter group performances, at the moment, no, it would be the same. So if you're using a non-assessed individual, then they would still need to meet the same time and requirements. Moving forward with component 1, it will be shorter if they're doing a duologue. So more on that when we can. I'm giving away all the juicy news here, but you're the first to know. So count yourselves lucky. Other questions are, yeah, the coursework, Serena, should be completed under supervision. It doesn't have to be like a formal exam, but it should be that you're there whilst they're doing it. So there's no, I think probably the biggest issue is around using AI tools to write it for them. Francesca, when they devise for component 1, do they still have to use the text from the extract, or can they use this as a stimulus without using the actual script? Yeah, they don't have to use the text at all. And Laura, you've only got 2 students. Could you be the non-assessed candidate? Absolutely, you could. Yes, it's absolutely fine. Okay. Whatever the situation is, then please just let us know and we can give permission. Now, any other questions? I think we asked quite a lot then, didn't we? So there may not be any more, but feel free to let me know if you do have any more on component 1. Whilst you're having a think, let's move on to component 2. Now, this is designing or performing in 2 extracts from 2 different plays. They are going to do a monologue or a duologue for the first one, and then they're going to do a group performance for the second one. A student, if a student wants to design in all the components and not do any performance, that's absolutely fine. There is no requirement to perform at all for a student. This is worth 20% of the qualification grade. We assess it between January and April in year 13. It can be a visiting examiner, or it can be a digital submission. That's up to you. You can choose to do whatever works best for you. You can have the students doing as many plays as you wish across your cohort. They don't all have to choose the same. Whatever is chosen here just needs to have, it can't be one of the set texts, and it should contrast somehow with the set text. That might be through when it was written, the writer, the form, the thematic content. There's lots of ways in which it can be, it can contrast, but it could be that one of your component 2 plays is the same playwright as one of the set texts. I mean, it's just there's a lot of, you've got a lot of freedom basically. The students are assessed on their use of vocal skills, vocal and physical skills, and characterization, communication, and interpretation. And for designers, the design skills, the understanding of the context and how they communicate, and their interpretation of the text. These are the timings, all in the specification, so what they should be aiming to do according to which section of component 2 they're doing. Students are also required to produce a communication of intention for each of the extracts that they're doing, and there are no specific marks for these, but it demonstrates how the student has interpreted the character or is going to interpret the character, and these intention sheets are submitted to the examiner, and we've got a pro forma on the website, and this is an example of what a intentions form looks like. So playing Macbeth, saying what happens in this scene, which is the vision of the dagger and him questioning his sanity, and a bit of an overview of the play, like where this is from, and what the decisions are by the student in terms of how they're going to interpret this. So it might be about the use of the voice, it might be a bit of direction and blocking that they're saying, and the purpose of it. So I hope that's clear. That's what they need to do. If you've got designers, then they can choose any of these: costume, lighting, set, or sound. If you have anyone who wanted to do puppetry as well, then just let us know, because that's possible to do. A student who designs will need to produce like the final documentation for their particular design element, and as if that it's then going to be handed over for someone to make it or implement it. So, for example, for a lighting design, that they'll do a lighting grid for the space. It will show which lanterns that they're going to use, the positioning of them. There will be a cue sheet. There will be a prompt copy with a copy of the script and what the cues are. And the student who's doing lighting would supervise in terms of the rigging and the focusing and the programming. They don't have to operate it themselves. If they're doing costume, they don't need to make it themselves. Same with set and same with sound. They can just make sure that whatever their ideas are being implemented by whoever it is that is doing it. But what we will need to see for component 1, if they're designing for that, and for component 2, is their design realized in the performance. So whoever realizes it is up to them. Excuse me. A question from Greg. Can they choose a different focus? Yes, they can. So it could be if a designer wanted to do set in component 1, and then in component 2 they did sound for the monologue, and then they did costume for the group piece. Absolutely fine. They can do any of those. And of course, a student could also do set design in component 1, and then act in the monologue, and then do the costume designing in the group piece. So lots and lots of choices there. And in the top right-hand corner, we have some templates. So where we're mentioning here about lantern schedules and prompt copies, we have the design templates that you can access and share with your students. These are popular choices, and they were last year anyway. So some big hitters in there. I'm sure you'll recognise most of them. Hamlet there cropping up again. I don't suppose anyone saw the recent production of Hamlet, did you? The one that the RSC did, the one with the Radiohead collaboration. That was really, really remarkable. I think that's on at the RSC in Stratford at the moment. I saw it in Manchester. It's really a really exciting production. Yeah, so those are some of the choices, and students don't have to reflect any practitioner methodologies or style of performance in component 2. It's absolutely fine. A monologue and a duologue can be edited. So sometimes it's a duologue, and if it works, that you can remove the second character and make it into a monologue. But in most cases, students will choose a large monologue and then edit it down. In terms of groups, again, some very popular choices here, like Top Girls, and some more recent popular ones like A Ghost Story and things like that. So I'm sure that you, well, maybe you do. Maybe you have plays that you always return to because you think that they are the best plays to use for this age group. Or it may be that each year you mix it up and try different ones. So if anyone does have any suggestions, please put them in the text. Any plays that you would always swear by, regardless of the cohort, or whether or not you work with the students and then see what would work best for them, because you are in the role of casting director, aren't you, in a lot of situations. Vicky, hello, Vicky. If the meaning of the play or scene isn't changed, can gender of characters be switched? Yes, it can, yeah. So it's possible for a student of a particular gender to play a different gender of the character. That's absolutely fine. But there are some instances when the actual gender of the character could be changed if it's not undermining the playwright's intentions too much. So everything's on offer, and I would just kind of use professional judgment on that, because it may be that they change the gender, but there's no actual reference in terms of, you don't need to change and shouldn't really be changing the actual script itself. You might edit out references, but not putting anything in. Here's some questions that come up frequently. The first one is about students using accents. And there's nothing in the assessment criteria that mentions accent. And it's really about understanding the playwright's intentions and how to interpret through the voice, because it might be more to do with class and age and gender and all these other elements that will provide the clarity of the interpretation. And that if a student, for instance, can't do an Alabama accent, I don't know why I picked Alabama, but you know what I mean. It's that thing of actually you can still understand the meaning of this character and this context without sounding like you are doing a really terrible accent. um, can students perform directly to the audience? If students are doing monologues and they have written to be performed directly to an audience, so there's, we saw some before on this list, like Fleabag or Every Brilliant Thing, then that's absolutely fine. That's what they were meant to be. If they take a monologue or they extract a monologue from like a duologue or a scene where originally in the play it's like the character is saying it to somebody else, but the student decides to then turn it and do it, making eye contact with the audience, that's what should be avoided. So if it's not written to be performed directly to them, don't adjust it to do so, because the actual consequences are that the student won't be able to access the full range of marks. Here's a question from Bethany. Are students allowed a non-assessed candidate on stage to direct their dialogue to in a monologue? No, they're not. But it's fine for them. It's fine for the student to just perform it as if someone was there. So we wouldn't give that permission, to be honest. But they could always use something else. They could use an object, or if that would help them. The next question is, can we do monos and duos on one day and then groups on another? And that's fine if because you can do them in different sessions. So one session for section A and then another session for group performances. And so if like you were recording component two, there's no time limit between the two sessions. So you could do monologues and duologues on the first Monday and then the groups the following Monday, for example. The next question is about extracts, the group extracts, keeping the narrative arc. Now, this is something that used to be part of the specification, where when there was a group performance, students would need to kind of edit the text so that it kept the flow of the whole play. So it's like a 3 hour play, it's edited down to half an hour that they need to keep this narrative arc. But you don't need to do that anymore. So you can just take an extract and edit it accordingly. Can students use extracts from musicals? Well, we would suggest using plays wherever possible, and purely because musicals tend to have songs that come up at like inappropriate moments and breaking up the dialogue. So there are some that would work, and you can think of plays with songs, and they're a bit more accessible. But if there's enough spoken dialogue, then you could. But students shouldn't really be singing in component two. So we've got lots of examples of work on the website in those sections again, those 3 sections, coursework support, exemplar material, and past training content. And we've got work from Macbeth, Pink Mist, Dogs Barking, Arabian Nights. Lots of choices are available. Oh, Bethany, that's a controversial question. Would I be allowed to get my students to prepare a monologue and duologue and submit the strongest one? I would say that what you do is, if you are going to do that, that you do that before the examination takes place, and then make the decision. But you couldn't have them prepare both, film them both, and then choose which one. So I would do that well in advance if you're going to take that approach. Because what we try to do is ensure that there's parity between those who are having the visit and those who are having who are doing the recording. So when I said before about there being different sessions for the monologues and duologues and for the group performances, is because if you're having a visit, you can also do that as well, where if there's enough in the cohort, the examiner can come on week 1 and then come back for week 2 to assess the group performances. Okay, any other questions on component 2 whilst I have a gulp? No, looking good. Okay, let's move on to component 3. There are 3 sections to the exam, and students are required how theatre makers create impact and how ideas and elements are communicated to an audience from a director's perspective, a performer's, and a designer's. Now, section A is the live theatre and the analysis and evaluation of something that they've been to see. They're going to select 1 question to answer from a selection of 2. And there's going to be a question which is generally mostly about performance, and then which is generally mostly about design. It's worth 20 marks, and students should take about 45 minutes to answer this section. Now, they're also allowed to take in 500 words of notes on a piece of theatre that they've seen, and we are the only exam board that allow this. It can be incredibly useful, especially when they've under the pressure of being sat in an exam. The performance can be an amateur one or a professional one, as long as it allows access to the demands of the component. So it's always worth considering what it is that they're going to see, from the fact that it could be a performance or design question that they want to answer. Live theatre means being a member of the audience in the same performance space. If there's a reason why students cannot access live theatre for whatever reason, please let us know, and we'll do our best to support the students, i.e. we can give permission for them to use recordings or stream work. And if they do, they will take in 500 words of notes. So whether they're using live theatre or recorded work, all students will be allowed to take in the notes. Musicals can be referred to, but not a musical that's sung through. So none of your Hamiltons, none of your Les Mises, they can't be used. There has to be some spoken dialogue. And in the notes, students can refer to any of those elements: performers, design considerations, the concept, the impact on the audience, the use of the space. They can include sketches and drawings and diagrams. And they just can't include photos. There's a front sheet that has to be completed by you and the student because you're going to authenticate that they've written these notes. And then once they've written them up, you keep hold of them and then you give them to them as they're going into the exam. And they're not handed in with the finished papers. Vicky. Our pupils fortunately see lots of live theatre, but if a pupil prefers to write about a production they've seen on NT Live, is that going to be okay? No, it's not. So wherever, the default is that they refer to live theatre. If there's a reason why they've not been able to access live theatre, then you'll let us know and then we can give permission, but it's not about a choice. They have to. And this is an agreement that we have with our regulators because this is how we can allow students to use the 500 words of notes. And if we just allowed students to be able to choose, they wouldn't be able to take the notes. And when we've talked to teachers, there was an overwhelming majority to say, keep the notes and we'll take them to see live theatre. Renata, do labels in diagrams count in the word count? No. It depends. I'd say, yeah, it depends on how big the label is. Because if it's getting into like a big paragraph, then it's pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable. The notes, yeah, you are authenticating this, so you are ensuring that the students aren't going overboard with what they're doing, because they can have it over a number of pages. It doesn't just need to be 1 page or 2 pages, but everything, like in terms of parity, it's what we need to ensure. So we're trusting you with this one. And because you have to keep hold of the notes, there's always the opportunity that we might ask to see them. And the next question is, yeah, Macaulay, looking at this, yes, they're always responding to a question. They're always responding, sorry, to a statement. So these are examples from last year where there's a statement so live theatre should make an audience laugh, not think. And then the other statement is about this, it should be more emphasis on technology rather than actors when creating a live performance today. So two really interesting kind of positions here, and the student will need to digest, think about the production that they're referring to and what might be more accessible for them in this context. So yeah, they are going to be thinking about they're responding to what they've seen in light of this statement. They're not just doing an evaluation. You can see here that so basically within the mark scheme, there's the indicative mark scheme, which gives examples of the type of things that students might refer to in their work. And then on the right-hand side, there's a level-based mark scheme. So this is like the quality of what they've done. So it's really, when you're having a look at past papers, it's really interesting to see the type of things that students can include. And as you can see here, candidates might refer to the following in their response, but there are also if it's a reasonable point that the students made that's not listed, it will be given marks and will be considered. So there's a few choices there. Now, section B is the exploration of a set text and the students being asked questions on a specific extract, and we give the extract in the exam room, so they don't know what it is in advance, and they they don't take the scripts in with them. They don't take their copies of the play in with them. And they are being asked questions from the perspective of a performer and a designer. It's worth 36 marks, and this is, we suggest that they take 60 minutes to answer the two questions. So here are the 6 plays, and yeah, I'm sure that you're all aware of these. Hopefully, these are in the specification. These are examples here from a previous paper. So, as a performer, how they would use stage space to support your portrayal of one character. Um, and then they're also being asked to refer to the performance text as a whole. So, as in, the student is able to say whether or like how this scene fits in with the rest of the play. So if the performer, if they're saying that the character in this scene is acting in a particular way, which isn't happening in the rest of the play, then that's the kind of thing that's going to they're going to be able to access marks here. Questions. Laura, how often do the set texts change? For the A level, we haven't changed them since they came out. And what should have happened by now, and has happened in the past, is that specifications have a lifespan, and by now we should be introducing the new ones. But because of the change of government and because of the curriculum and assessment review, which has been happening, and the results of which come out in the autumn term, everything is kind of on hold. So we've been waiting to see about what will happen and when the new specifications might be then released. Depending on what happens, will depend on whether or not we're going to change any of the set texts. We give enough. We give enough kind of notice. So, for example, if we wanted to change set text for the assessment in 2028, we would now be starting to let centres know so that they can start to teach them in September 2026. So they've got the full cohort. So if there are any changes, we will let you know kind of through the next academic year. Andy, yes, students are answering both of these questions. So again, indicative mark scheme here. And the type of things that we will be looking for, examiners will be looking for in terms of the use of the body in the space, the use of the available stage space, the use of levels and proxemics and entrances and exits, etc. And then this is an example of the top level and how it will be marked in terms of the sophisticated mark scheme. This is the areas of focus for the past 5 years. I've not included the COVID years because although we have papers, it's not necessarily fair in terms of looking at this. So these are the areas to look for. So you can see that there are certain patterns happening, and that in terms of preparing your students for this, and to answer these questions, that these are the areas that they should be studying when they are looking at the particular set text. In terms of the question around covering the extract as a whole, is there any guidance as to how many parts of the extract they should be referred to, and can they choose to structure this around various lines, directions in the task? Well, there's no specific guidance, but the expectation is that they're going to be able to refer to the rest of the play to kind of back up the choices that they're making and how they're communicating. So the one that I gave you about is what's happening to the character in this scene also reflective of what happens to them in the rest of the scene. It's worth thinking, well, this is going to be a regular thing that they're going to be referring to throughout the answer. So we've got lots of great examples on our website about this, so it's worth having a look at some of our exemplars. Which is answering your question, Sally. So we've got some every autumn term we release 30 exemplars for A level, so 10 for each section. And that's a whole range. And so from that, you'll be able to see a variety of responses, but what the really the high marking ones are looking for. Sometimes there's like you can see that there are patterns. You can see that there's a kind of range of responses. So it might be that a student is giving like four big examples that they've then clarified. Sometimes it might be three that they've gone into a bit more detail and that they're linking together. So there's not like kind of one set way to do it and one set number of ways to do it. So it's worth having a look at our examples. Rachel, there will be a recording available after this session. Which you should be able to. It does take a couple of days to come through. Do students need to refer to theatre practitioners in section B? There's no need to reference a named practitioner, and should they refer to particular theatrical influences and style, they can refer to whatever they want to, and that might be reflective of the play that they're looking at, because obviously we have the plays that are in this section are using have different styles and different approaches. In terms of the mark scheme around theatre, how theatre's developed and how theatre's performed. In terms of developed, it's the student's ability to show knowledge of understanding of how a theatrical element is developed as opposed to how it's performed. So it might be how an idea might be like how it's developed within the work. So a character might have a particular physical trait that develops in key moments. So it might be how they fix their tie, or it might be how they stand or pace around that it kind of develops, or it might be that it's a sound effect that develops or changes or underpins or underscores the action. So this is what we're referring to in terms of develops. So it might be like in Mackinac, it might be that there's how light changes from in terms of intensity, in terms of color, in terms of direction. There's lots of ways in which this can be done. Again, have a look at our examples because there's some really good ones. Can students move to another time, place, or setting? So they've got the idea with section B is that they're reflecting the use of the theatrical conventions and the dramatic elements to realize the ideas from the page to the stage. And with a play like Accidental Death, for example, it's rooted in a specific incident at a specific time and place in history. And if there's going to be a 21st century interpretation, there's got to be this recognition of this. So it's not that they can't go all out, but the students have got to recognize the universalities of Dario Fo's message in this. The language can't be altered. So it's actually thinking, do I want to go wild with this? Or actually, have I got enough to do with just explaining my interpretation and how this can work? So, some questions. Do they need to refer to socio-historical context? I mean, in light of what I've just said, there is that going on, Charlotte, that talking about and also within the plays, they're all a bit rooted in particular contexts, aren't they? So you'd like to think that the students would be picking up on those. Laura, could they reference a contrasting style for their ideas response? They could do. I mean, again, it's about, I suppose, doing what they can within the time. And if they feel like by showing something in contrast will really illuminate and highlight the ideas that they've got, then go for it. But I suppose it's just about how best to present their ideas. Sometimes you don't need to do that, and you can just be really clear with what you're doing without having to say what it isn't. There can be an intro, Greg, because they've got this. They just to clarify what it is that they're doing in terms of this is about the use of stage space with this character, and what I'd like to see is blah blah blah. So they can just reference the question and then dive straight in. Lots of questions there on section B. I'm aware of the time. We've got 8 minutes left. Better whiz through this really quickly. Sorry, we may need to do a follow-up session. So in section C, students demonstrating their ideas for a production of a concept of a set text and how they're going to communicate that with the audience. There's got to be an awareness of the original performance conditions, and they're choosing one question from a choice of two. There is they're going to take in a clean copy of their script for this. It's worth 24 marks, and it's 45 minutes to do. I'm sure you know all of those plays. That's all in the specification. Those are the 8 practitioners, big hitters there. And then what we've got here is around 2 different questions. They choose one. The first one is about characterization. The second one is about design elements. Again, I will leave you to look at the question papers and mark schemes and lead examiner reports for these. We've got tons and tons of these examples that you can have a look at. These are how the questions have been shaped in the past few years. So you can see there that there's type of areas that you should be working on with your students. In terms of concepts, it may be that they change the performance style. It may be that they change the historical period or setting, but what they're not allowed to do is cut the language or alter the meaning of the text. So it's worth having a look in our lead examiner reports, because we've got some where students go off in really wonderfully creative directions, but sometimes that are a bit self-limiting, like Wojciech staged in an abandoned swimming pool with a grandmother filling it with water from a hose pipe, with the production taking place. It's like, that's a great idea, but is it actually, what's it doing? What are we finding here? So it's worth having a look at some of the examples that do allow students to access all the marks available. Andy, the practitioner can complement and the practitioner can work against, and it's fine. And and you can see that there are some that are lovely marriages, but it doesn't have to be that way. There's no requirement to just choose some over others. You've got free reign with this. Yeah, that's a consideration around Punch Drunk and how Punch Drunk would work. I've seen Punch Drunk work where there has been a lot of dialogue. I've seen Punch Drunk work like It Felt Like a Kiss, what was the one, The Mask of the Red Death, and like I've seen ones where there's been loads of dialogue and there's been a really firm kind of promenade style rather than it being open. So if you're going to use Punch Drunk, it's worth introducing students to the fact that there are Punch Drunk productions that use speech. It's not purely kind of physical theatre stuff. Right. 4 minutes. I'm going to whiz through this last bit of info. You can get all those materials that I've been talking about on the website by going into exam materials. And you can go back all the way to June 2018. In the teaching and learning section, we've got loads of stuff: course planners, schemes of work, FAQs, set text guides for all 15 set texts, approved playlists for component 2. So if you're worried and thinking about, or I don't know what to do, they've got a whole list there that you can have a look at. From September for any year 13 students, you will be able to submit your text choices from the start of September. So don't use it yet if you've got year 13s, wait until then. You don't need to do anything for your year 12 students. You don't need to tell us. You don't need to do anything at all. It's only when students get to year 13 that you need to start telling us information and making exam entries. There's also going to be an admin support guide that will be available. This is the 2025 version. So from September, there will be a 26 version, and that will have all the guidance you need on for all 3 components on how to share work, upload it, all of the rules, all of the guidance. We've got those templates which I was talking about for design. These are the key dates for next year. You'll be able to submit the plays and practitioners for year 13s from the 1st of September until the 7th of March. The window for component 2 will open on the 5th of Jan and run until the 24th of April. You'll be able to upload component 2 work from the 31st of Jan until about the 6th of May. The moderation window for component 1 will be the 15th of May, and the component 3 exam will take place on the 21st of May, which is a couple of weeks earlier than it was this year. If you want any information from me, I produce a monthly newsletter and update. If you go onto the subject section of our website, you can find my latest newsletters and look back in the news section at all the ones I've ever produced. And you can also sign up here on this page to my details. You can email me at teachingperformingarts@pearson.com. You can give us a call. We've got a Facebook group which is growing every day, and lots of useful questions and resources being shared on there. And you can book an appointment with me, a one-to-one appointment. And I hope that is everything at 16:59. Wow, look at that for timing. That's it. Thank you for joining today. Hope you found it useful. Do get in touch if there's anything else you need. Nice to see you all. Enjoy the rest of the term. Good luck with your planning. Have a lovely summer break. Goodbye for now.